Now the next thing that we're going to do is let's go ahead and start shaping this jawline. A lot of times when people are drawing faces, they make two major mistakes. Number one, when they're drawing somebody's outside silhouette of their face, they make it lopsided. And number two, they're not sure how high or low to put the actual jaw corner. So this is going to really help you out as an illustrator, for having a nice even shape on the outside silhouette and knowing exactly where that jawline corner is. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect this face together. But what we need first of all is we need to have this egg shape. So for instance, if you're working on the handout here, you already have this egg shape on your handout. But if you're working on just a blank piece of paper like I am here, we need to go ahead and get this egg shape in here first. Now, in order to practice this, go ahead and turn your paper over. And what I want you to do is to draw a basic egg shape going upwards. So this would be wider at the bottom, more narrow at the top, and then you'll come and you'll connect those. So again, wider at the bottom, more narrow at the top. And then I want you to do one where it's flipped over. So take an egg shape, but flop it over. So now it's going to be narrow at the bottom and wider at the top. And this is the one that we're going to use for drawing faces. So basically it's the same egg shape, it's just flipped upside down. You'll start to notice also where, for instance, I'm right-handed and my wrist will pivot right here. So for me, when I'm doing my egg shape to one side, it turns out different from the other side. So sometimes it's also helpful if you were to draw the small part first and the large part second, and have a sense of here's the center of that, here's the width of that, and then I'll use my wrist to get connecting from small to big, and then I'll turn my paper over, and again I'm using my wrist again, going from big to small. And then this helps me to get more of an even shaped face. So come back over to your page and we're going to go ahead and get this egg shape in here now. So I zoomed out a little bit further so you can see my hand motion, plus I'm going to move this a lot. If you want, you can go ahead and watch me do mine first, and then you can hit pause and do yours second. So again, this is her chin. And your chin is smaller than your skull. So the chin is going to be the small part of the egg shape. And then up here at the top of skull, this is going to be the large egg shape. And everything is going to fit inside of this 5 inches by 8 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this side first. I want to come up here and I want to make sure I'm hitting at A. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to hit at A, and then blend this back into the top of skull. And then for me, since I'm right-handed, I'm going to rotate it like this so I can blend now from the wide part of the top of her skull, making sure I'm hitting A, and then blending back into the chin area. So do yours now and make sure you're staying inside the 5x8 box. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make this a little more mathematical, a little more symmetrical. So when I go from F into this new egg shape that I drew, I can take a quick measurement of that, and then I can see, did I do the same thing on both sides? And for me, no, this side is shorter, this side is longer. So I can decide, do I want her to have a rounder face or a more narrow face? So I can choose which one I would prefer. So for me, I'm going to choose this one here. So what I'll do is I'll darken this in where the center of her mouth is hitting that new egg shape. And then I'll take what that measurement is and come back to this side and make it the same. So that egg shape should be more like this. Then as long as both of yours are hitting at A, you're okay. If it's not, make sure your line is hitting back to A, back to A. Then when we come up here to the hairline, this is J, you can do the same thing we just did down here. So you can decide, here's where I hit on J on this side, here's where it is on this side, and I can choose one and make it the same for both. And then once you have that, go ahead and put a little circle dot there as well. Now the face itself should kind of feel like there's a corner at her eye level and a corner at the jawline and a corner down here at her chin. And that's what we want to get now. So you can see this one here where I've started to darken it in. So going from A to F, it's almost as if though you're doing a straight line, but if you compare it to a ruler, it's still a curve. So it's not quite a straight line, it's still a curve. And then the same thing when you go from F to H, so this is center of the mouth down to the chin, it'll feel like it's more of a straight line. You're cutting it away, but it's still got a little bit of an outside curve to it. If you need to, as a beginner, you can lightly draw a straight line from the center of the mouth back to the chin. So this is from F to H. And once I draw that straight line in there, you'll notice that I'm cutting too fast. So I would be cutting off a lot of this natural curve right here. And that's bad. You don't want to cut that off too fast. So I can see from this ruler edge back out to the egg shape that somewhere in the middle of there I can do a softer curve, but I'm still definitely giving a cut in feeling. So that's what you want. You want to cut in here, cut in there, and that's going to give this jawline feel. So let's do the same thing on the other side. As a beginner, again, go ahead and use your ruler to connect from F to H. So this is the chin connecting back to the center of the mouth. And then you can see the distance back out to that old egg shape. And we want something in between the two. Since I'm right-handed, I'm going to go ahead and turn it this way so I can pivot and get a nice smooth curve. And again, from H to H, your chin is fairly flat. Some people's chin will even slightly corner in, and some people's is just slightly rounds back out. Both of these models that we have, their chin still rounds out, even though there's a little bit of a flat spot. So at this stage, if you want to, you could go slightly outside of the 8-inch distance and round this just ever so slightly, but still keeping a flat feeling to it. And also, if this jawline is slightly different from this one, don't change them. Leave them just a little bit uneven or a little bit different, because nobody's face is truly perfect. So this is about as perfect as you want it to be. We're going to do the same thing now for the side of her face. So again, as a beginner, go ahead and connect from A down to the center mouth here at F, lightly with a ruler. And then you can see from here to the old egg shape, if you were to just trim away a little bit, but you're still giving this a slight outside curve. And then you'll notice in this area, it feels like there's a corner, and that is correct. So you'll notice this, it's a corner right here and right here. So then this is coming back up into the eye line. So go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. And once you've darkened it in, it looks a little bit messy. So let's go ahead and take our eraser and get rid of some of these older lines. Now the next thing I want to work on is getting this hairline. At first, we're not going to actually draw hair. So for today's lesson, you're not worried about, hey, what's a cool hairstyle I can do? What we are worried about, though, is where would the hair start growing out of her forehead? So when we come up to this dot here along the hairline, it's going to connect back to A. So again, as a beginner, if you want, you can connect a straight line and then come back and find a space in between the straight line and that curve, and you're going to go from A back up to that J, this hairline area. And then you want to corner in here heading back to J to give it a feel of this is her hairline. So we'll do the same thing on this side. So now we have the hairline area. Now for me, looking up here at the skull, I can see that this side I have a lot more skull than I do on this side. In the end, it doesn't even matter, because once I start doing her hairstyle, we're good to go. So you could either erase both of these, or if it's distracting to you that they're gone, you could just quickly make them look both the same. Now that you can see the distance between the two. The most important thing is just to know where that skull is. Now at this stage, you should be able to show this to anybody, upside down or sideways or whatever, and within just a few seconds they'll be like, oh, I get it, it's a face, and they should be able to put it up right, and they would say, oh yeah, I can see her eyes, I can almost see her nose and mouth. It should look and feel like that to you or someone else. So if there is somebody near you, just go ahead and ask them, say, hey, what is this? What is this that I'm making? And give it to them upside down and see if they notice, yes, it's a face. If for some reason if somebody else is struggling to figure out what you just drew, then potentially you made a mistake somewhere when you're doing the jaw lines or plotting out the eyes and nose and mouth locations. So go back and check those now and just make sure everything is in its place, and it should look like this. Now the last thing that we want to establish on here is we want to establish where are her ears, as well as when you draw hair, about how big should it be up off the top of her head and about how far should it be off of her face. So come in here to where we have I is this middle of her forehead, J is her hairline, and then above that is top of skull. What we're going to do is we're going to measure from J to the top of the skull, And then we're going to repeat that measurement going above the skull. Also, if you remember, in this instance, it's 1 inch from here to here. So then we'll repeat 1 more inch going out to here. And then just lightly draw a straight line. What this is going to be is this location here is going to be K, and this is going to be the top of hair. So it's very important to know that this was the top of her skull if she shaved her head, and this would be the top of her hair if she had some cool hairstyle. So for instance, on this girl, her hair is going up off the page. So if I lined up her hairline with this hairline, the top of her skull would be somewhere in this area, the top of her hair would be up there. So like on this drawing, here's the hairline where you see it's divided and then it splits off over her eyes. That's the hairline. The top of her skull is somewhere in here, and this is the top of her hair out here. Another question is how wide should her hair be coming back down the sides of her face? So this, about how wide is this, her hair coming down? And I would add another eye. So I would take her eye from the side of the face going outwards. So here what we have is from C to C. On your paper, it would be the side of the face outwards. So for instance, mine's a little bit off center to this side, so it would be slightly off the page here. But I can still go from here and curve this back up to K. And it gives me a gauge of when I'm drawing hair, it would be in that column area. And since I have lots of room on this side, I'll go ahead and do this side. What I'm going to do is rotate this because I'm right-handed. I'm going to find out the width of her eye. So again, this is from C to C. And then I'm going to go from the outside of her face, which is A, and I'm going to come out that C, 1 eye width beyond her face. And I can connect that back up to the hairline. A lot of times what happens with hair is the hairstylist will get the model's hair up and out and off the skull. But eventually, as the hair comes out off the face, it's going to drop down with gravity. So usually from J to K is a very large space. So there's lots of hair up here on top of her head. But as you come to the sides of her head, it's just about an eye width. And that's because it's now falling with gravity. So you'll notice that where on a model her hair will be high on the top, but not very wide on the sides. Something like this, you're starting to kind of show like her hair was just blow dried. Maybe she's even walking along a runway and there's some wind blowing. But something like this is even getting a little bit too far away from her eye. So if I were to go back and clean this up a little more, I would probably trim some of this off because it would be falling with gravity. So it's just giving you a general idea of about where the hair would flow, going from the hairline to the top of the hair. The last thing we want to know is her ears. The tricky thing with ears is if the model is facing straight at the camera, but if she's slightly tilting her chin downwards, her ears are going to appear to be higher in her head. So for instance, in this model, her ears are well above her eye line, and the bottom of her nose, they're well above that as well. So in this instance, the model here is actually tilting her chin downwards, and that brought the ears upward. This one here, she's a little more squared up with the camera, and you can see that her ear is almost at the nose level, and then here her ear sticks up a little bit above the eye level. So this is kind of more of a standard look that we're looking for, which would be the model is looking straight at the camera and she's not tilting her chin down or up. So again, to make this really generic, what we're going to do is, if we come over from the nose, we want to make sure that her ear is a little bit above that. So find the location G, which is the tip of her nose. If you recall, it's a little bit above D, which was the actual halfway point. And from G, just freehand coming off to the side here, and we want to make sure her ear is a little bit above that. So you can go ahead and start the bottom of an ear right there. And I'll do the same thing here on the other side. Here's the tip of her nose. If I come out to her jawline, a little bit above that is going to be her ear. So this is where her ear is going to come down into her face, right here. And then I can just eyeball mine really quick. I'm noticing that one is slightly lower than the other, so I'll go ahead and just fix that right now. If you want, you could even double check with measuring from the center of the mouth up to that bottom of the ear to make sure it's the same measurement. Now the next one is from the eye line, the ear has to go up. So what I want you to do is, I want you to start drawing a line up and even put an arrowhead on it, pointing up. So it starts from the eye line and it's pointing up. And do the same thing over here. Start from the eye line, put an arrowhead on it so it's pointing up. The shape of the ear is going to be very similar to a question mark. So take a minute now to just draw a question mark. Now, if you've done your question mark similar to how I've drawn mine, the bottom of this, go ahead and scoop around that and tuck it back in. And then connect these with a line. And basically, you've drawn your ear with an earring. So this would be just like a little hoop earring. So let's do that again. Do a question mark with the dot. And then finish the question mark by going around that dot, drawing what would be the sides of her face, and then go ahead and make this a little hoop earring. So that gives you a sense for on her left ear. And then practice one going the opposite direction. So mirroring that, draw a question mark. And then we'll turn that one into an ear going the opposite direction. Make it an earring in the side of her face. Now, if you look at somebody's ear, there's a lot less going on, but that gives you a sense of it's this somewhat of a question mark shape. And obviously these are exaggerations. So let's do now what it would really look like. So you're going to start at the eye line, immediately move upwards, come back and down, and connect it to the side of her face. And you want this to be very close to her face, not very big. On ears, I would rather you accidentally draw yours a little too small than a little bit too big. And then get your ear for the opposite side. So at this point, I just want to review really quick. Basically, we're doing these mathematical layouts that are really easy to memorize and a really easy way to get your face super accurate. At the same time, you don't want somebody's face to be too perfect and accurate, too cookie cutter, because then she might start to look a little bit robotic. So when your ears are slightly uneven or slightly different sizes or slightly different shapes, that's actually really good. As well as her jawline down here, when you draw them, don't be too perfect that they both match perfectly. as well as when you move up here into the hairline area. It doesn't have to be totally perfect because everything else is so plotted out. You need a little bit of a uniqueness, a little bit of a handmade feel to it. So that's okay when you get to those locations. Also, as you draw more and more face shapes and more ears and jawlines and stuff, you're going to start to develop your own style as well. So if yours looks exactly like mine the first time you do it, don't worry, over time yours will start to look different from mine and the next person's will look different from theirs, and that's where you'll start to develop your own style. Okay, so what I want you to do is, before we move on and start to learn to do the eyes, nose, and mouth, I want you to go ahead and, if you used one of the blank layouts from your handout, I want you to go ahead and make 3 more out of blank paper. So following the demo, just starting with some blank paper, I want you to make 3 more and do the same size, this 5 inches wide, 8 inches tall. So then when you're done, there should be 4 of these, just the layouts. And while you're doing the layout, I want you to really concentrate that you're trying to learn and memorize these formulas. The sooner that you memorize these formulas, the sooner you can move on to just drawing faces a lot quicker and not having to think about it. So after a while, it'll be like tying your shoes, where you just start placing things correctly automatically.